Today, we're diving into something a little different, a philosophy of power that's cold, strategic, and frankly, pretty unforgiving. We're talking about the Machiavellian way of setting boundaries. This isn't about asking nicely or explaining your feelings. Nope, this is about absolute, calculated control. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so this one quote, it's pretty much the foundation for everything we're about to talk about. The whole idea is to just strip away any reliance on hope or other people's goodwill and instead face the cold, hard reality of power. The argument's really simple when you think about it. If you're merciful but you have no power to back it up, you're basically setting yourself up for failure. It's not seen as a virtue, it's seen as a fatal weakness. So here's how we're going to break this down. Think of it as a 5-stage journey. We start with the basics, reactive defense, what to do when someone actually crosses a line. Then we'll build up to being more proactive, where your presence alone is enough to command respect. And finally, we get to the end game, becoming absolutely, truly irreplaceable. All right, let's start at the beginning. The law of cold response. This is the foundation, right? It's all about that critical first moment, that instant when someone decides to test your limits. How you react right then and there, well, it sets the stage for literally everything that comes next. But why do people even cross your boundaries in the first place? Well, according to this way of thinking, it's never an accident. It's always a test, a probe. They're looking for weakness. They're trying to figure out if your boundaries are just words or if they're backed by real, actual consequences. They're measuring that gap between what you say and what you're really willing to do. And right here, you have a critical choice. You can have an emotional reaction, shouting, getting into a debate, over-explaining yourself. But that just plays right into their hands. It screams that you've lost control. The other option? A cold response. And that does the exact opposite. Think, silence, decisive action. That's what freezes the room and lets you instantly take back the power.
This right here is the mantra you need to remember. I don't argue, I adjust access. See, your goal isn't to win some silly argument. It's to show them there's a consequence. You just refuse to play their game. Instead, you change the rules of the game completely by controlling the one thing they actually want from you: your time, your presence, your attention. So, that brings us to the main tool for pulling off this cold response: silence. And let's be super clear here. This is not about being passive or just taking it. This is about turning the absence of words into a weapon. You have to see strategic silence as an offensive move. It's not defense. It creates this psychological vacuum that the other person just feels this intense pressure to fill. And in their discomfort trying to fill that silence, they start to reveal everything: their real intentions, their insecurities, their weaknesses, all while you're just sitting there, perfectly still and in total control. Okay, so how do you actually do this? Here's the playbook. Step 1, just let the silence fall. Don't rush to say anything. Let them sit with the awkwardness of what they just did. Step 2, hold their gaze. Maintain that calm, unmoving eye contact. It shows you're totally unfazed. And then step 3, if you decide to speak, you use very few, very deliberate words. Something cold, sharp, and final. Like, that's not acceptable. Or just, we're done here. And that's it. No long explanation. Yeah, my silence is power. That just nails it, doesn't it? We live in a world where everyone is rushing to speak, to defend themselves, to explain everything. So choosing silence, that's a radical act. It's disciplined strength. And honestly, it communicates way more than words ever could. Okay, so we've talked about reacting. Now let's shift gears. Let's talk about preventing the attacks from ever happening in the first place. This section is all about forging your aura, building a reputation so solid that people wouldn't even think about testing you. The easiest way to think about your aura is like your reputation walking into the room before you do. It's the silent message you're constantly broadcasting about what you will and will not tolerate. When your aura is strong, people just get your limits without you ever having to say a word. You don't need to post a list of rules. Your very presence enforces them. So how do you build this personal fortress? Well, it's built on 3 pillars. First up is precision. You have to decide on your standards, your non-negotiables, and be crystal clear about them. Second, consistency. You have to enforce the same rule every single time with every single person, no exceptions. And third, enforcement. This one's huge. Use minimal words and maximum action. Let the consequences do the teaching, not your lectures.
And that's really the mindset you have to adopt. My boundaries are law. It's an internal commitment you make to yourself. Your boundaries stop being suggestions or, polite preferences. They become the absolute, unshakable laws that govern how you interact with the world. Okay, but what happens when someone doesn't just test your boundaries, but blows right through them? What happens when they test these laws? Well, that's where we get into the more advanced, even aggressive tactics, calculated punishment, and the strategic use of absence. Now, the key word here is calculated. This isn't about flying off the handle and lashing out in anger. Emotional revenge just makes you look unstable. This is a strategic, completely dispassionate action that has one single purpose: to make sure that boundary is never crossed again. It's not for you to feel better, it's to teach them a permanent lesson. And for this punishment to actually work, it has to follow 3 principles. First, speed. You act swiftly, any delay kills your authority and makes it look like you had to work up the courage. Second, precision. You have to strike where it actually hurts them, their access to you, a privilege they enjoy, their relevance. And third, finality. It's one clean move, and then silence. You let the emptiness that you've just created do all the work. And this right here, this leads us to what might be the ultimate enforcement tool. Because sometimes the most powerful punishment isn't an action you take at all. It's the complete and total removal of your presence, your value, from their life. Just think about how powerful that is. We live in this hyper-connected world where everyone is always available. So making yourself truly absent, that's a radical move. Your absence forces them to finally recognize your value. It creates this void that becomes a permanent reminder of just how badly they messed up. Okay, so all of this has been building to one thing: the final law. This is the end game of strategic power. We're moving beyond just defending your boundaries now. We're talking about achieving the ultimate form of security, becoming completely, utterly irreplaceable. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. The ultimate position of power isn't about being the most popular person. It's not even about being the most feared. It's about being the most necessary. It's that point where your skills, your knowledge, your influence, it's all so woven into the fabric of the system that the very idea of removing you is unthinkable. It would cause a collapse. So how do you get there? It comes down to 3 core strategies. First, you have to control something they value, something they depend on, master a domain. Second, you use those key moments of withdrawal, of absence, to gently, or not so gently, remind them of your worth. And third, you fuse together fear and respect. You create a situation where they rely on you, where they know that losing you would cost them far, far more than keeping you. And that brings us to the final affirmation: I am irreplaceable. Now, in this framework, that's not some arrogant boast. It's not about ego. It's a statement of strategic fact. It's the final acknowledgement that you have successfully engineered your way into a position of true, unshakable security. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Everything we've talked about today, it all really hinges on the power of withdrawal, of silence, of making yourself scarce. So my question for you is this: in a world that is constantly demanding our attention, our connection, our access, is the truest form of power simply having the discipline to say no and control that access? What do you think?